The desert was endless, wide and silent. The hot sun burned on the sand, and the wind moved slowly across the dunes. For many days, a lone man walked through this wasteland, searching for water, food, and shelter. He had no one with him, no guide, no map, only his own will to survive. Every step was heavy, and every breath was dry, but he kept walking. This land was empty of life, or at least it seemed. No birds flew in the sky, no animals moved in the sand. Only the sound of his own boots and the whisper of the wind kept him company. But on this day, something changed. Far ahead, he saw a strange shape, half hidden in the sand. At first, he thought it was only broken metal, an old machine left behind long ago. But as he walked closer, his eyes grew wide. It was not just metal lit, it was a cage. The cage was large, built of heavy iron bars, though most of them were rusted and bent. The sand had swallowed part of it, and the sun had burned its surface until it looked red and broken. He slowed down, fear and curiosity mixing inside his chest. Why was a cage here, in the middle of nowhere? Who built it, and for what reason? The man's steps grew careful. He walked around the cage, eyes searching for traps, and then he froze. His heart jumping. Inside the cage sat a figure, small and silent. It was a girl. She sat on the sand floor, her arms around her knees, her head bowed low. Her hair was long, tangled, and filled with dust. Her skin glowed faintly. Not like human skin, but brighter, softer, almost like moonlight trapped in flesh. Her clothes were gone, her body covered only with dirt and sand. Tears ran slowly down her cheeks, leaving lines on her dusty face. She was breathing, but weak. So weak that she looked like she could fall into death at any moment. The man's throat went dry. He had heard of strange things in the wasteland, monsters, machines, even alien ruins, but never had he seen something like this. An alien girl, locked in a cage, left to die under the burning sun. Her beauty was haunting, but it was her suffering that struck him hardest. Her body trembled, her eyes opened slowly. When she heard him, and those eyes, they were not human. Large, shining, filled with light and sorrow. Eyes that had seen too much pain. The man stepped back, unsure. Was this real? Or was it a trick of the desert? Could this be some trap set by raiders waiting for him to come closer? His hand moved to the small blade on his belt, ready if danger appeared. But the girl did not move to attack. She only looked at him, silent, tears falling. Her lips moved as if trying to speak, but no words came out, only a soft, broken sound. The desert wind howled between them. For a long moment, the man stood frozen. He wanted to walk away, to leave this strange vision behind. But something inside him stopped him. He could not forget her eyes. Eyes that begged, pleaded, and cried without words. He came closer, step by step, his shadow falling across the cage. The girl lifted her head higher, her gaze locking with his. Her body shook as she tried to rise, but she was too weak. Her hands clung to the rusted bars, her fingers thin and bleeding from sharp edges. Still, she tried, as if to reach him. The man's heart beat fast. He felt pity, fear, and confusion all at once. Who had done this to her? Why leave her here to die? And why did it feel as if fate itself had led him to this moment? The sun dropped lower in the sky, painting the desert in gold and red. The cage glowed in the light, and the girl inside looked like a ghost from another world. Her tears caught the sunlight, shining like crystals on her face. The man stood silent, knowing one thing with certainty. Whatever this was, his life would never be the same again. The man stood in silence, his eyes locked on the cage. The desert around him was still, as if holding its breath inside. The alien girl did not move much, only her hands gripped the iron bars with weak strength. Her face was thin, her lips Dry, but her eyes, they burned with desperate hope. Hope that hurt him more than her tears. He stepped closer, his boots sinking into the hot sand. The girl tried to speak again, her mouth opening. A soft sound came out, strange and broken, like a melody from another world. It was not human language. But the feeling behind it was clear. She was begging, pleading, she needed help. The man's chest grew heavy. He had lived a long time in the wasteland, and he had seen suffering before. But never like this, never so raw, so fragile, a living. Being caged like an animal, left to die, forgotten by whoever had placed her here. His hand touched the cage lightly, and the iron burned his skin from the heat of the sun. The girl flinched, pulling back, her eyes wide with fear. She thought, he might hurt her. He raised both hands slowly to show he meant no harm. His voice was low, calm, though his throat was dry. "It's all right," he whispered, though he knew she could not understand, but maybe his tone would reach her. Maybe kindness was stronger than language. The girl's fingers relaxed a little, still holding the bars but no longer pulling away. Her chest rose and fell as she breathed harder. She was so weak she could barely stay upright, yet she tried to keep her eyes open. She wanted to trust. But fear and pain had been her only companions for too long. The man circled the cage slowly. Looking for a lock, rust covered the metal and deep cracks ran through the bars. It had been here for years, maybe longer. But the structure still held her prisoner. He found an old chain twisted at one corner. It was broken, yet strong enough to hold the bars shut. Whoever built this cage had wanted her to stay trapped, to suffer, to waste away. The man crouched. Near the chain, he pulled at it, but it did not move. He took out his blade. Pressing it against the metal, the sound of scraping iron filled the air. The girl watched him closely, her glowing eyes following every move. Her lips trembled, and, for the first time, a single word escaped. It was soft, broken, but clear enough. "Please." The man froze, his heart pounding. She had spoken. The word was simple, universal. And it cut through every barrier between them. He looked at her again, and in her eyes he saw the truth. She had no strength left, no food, no water, no hope. All she had left was that single word, a cry for mercy. His blade cut deeper into the chain, sparks flying as metal scraped against metal. The desert sun fell lower, painting the sky in red and gold. Sweat ran down his face, his muscles aching, but still he cut. The girl pressed herself closer to the bars, her hands trembling with need. Her tears fell faster, not only from sadness now, but from the faint light of hope returning. Finally, the chain snapped. The sound was sharp. Like thunder in the quiet desert, the bars loosened, shaking slightly as the man pulled them apart. The girl gasped softly, the sound fragile but alive. Her prison was open. For a moment she did not move. Her body was too weak, her legs too heavy. She stared at the opening as if afraid it was a dream that would vanish. The man reached out his hand, his palm open, an invitation. Her eyes filled with new fear, fear of trust. She looked at his hand, then back into his eyes, slowly, painfully. She lifted her arm, her thin fingers stretching toward him. When her skin touched his, he felt warmth, a strange light flowing through her. Not human, not ordinary, but alive, truly alive. He pulled gently, helping her step forward. Her feet touched the desert sand outside the cage for the first time in who knew how long. She stumbled, nearly falling, but he caught her in his arms. Her body was light, too light. She had suffered hunger and thirst for days, maybe weeks. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breathing shallow but steady. She was free, but broken. The man looked around. The desert stretched forever, yet, for the first time, he felt eyes watching. The wind carried whispers, faint but sharp. Shadows moved far on the horizon. He narrowed his eyes. Someone had put her here, and if they had left her to die, they would not be pleased to find her free. Danger was coming. He tightened his grip around the alien girl. Her tears wet his shirt, her silent sobs shaking her thin frame. But in his heart, a decision had already been made. He could not leave her. Whatever awaited them in the desert, he would face it together with her. And as the sun sank, the desert became darker. The cage stood behind them, broken and empty. A silent witness to the beginning of something far greater. A bond formed not by words, but by tears, pain, and fragile hope. The desert was quiet, but not peaceful. Something heavy hung in the air, a warning that danger was near. He glanced back at the broken cage, its rusted bars bent open. It looked like a grave now, a prison of death finally broken. But the girl was too weak to walk, her head resting against his chest. Every breath she took was shallow, fragile, as if she might slip away at any moment. For a moment, the man thought of leaving. Not leaving her behind, but leaving this wasteland altogether. He could carry her, take her far away, find shelter, find water, find life. But another voice inside him whispered, "What if they come? What if those who locked her here return?" He had seen shadows on the horizon. He had felt the weight of unseen eyes. Whoever had built that cage would not have forgotten. He lowered her gently to the sand, crouching beside her. The alien girl opened her eyes again, those strange glowing orbs filled with exhaustion and fear. She tried to speak, her lips moving. But the words were broken, not human, not clear. Yet he understood the meaning. She was asking him, without words, "Will you protect me, or will you leave me?" The man closed his eyes. He had lived his whole life alone, surviving one day at a time. He had no family left, no village, no home. Trust was dangerous in the wasteland, but something about her, something in her sorrow, her tears, her silent strength, it touched a part of him he thought was long dead. He looked down at his hands. Calloused and scarred, these were the hands of a survivor. A fighter hands that had killed to live, but now they held something delicate, fragile, and precious. Not a weapon, not food, not water, but hope. The desert wind grew stronger, carrying with it faint sounds, footsteps. No, heavier, sharper voices. Or was it the whisper of the sand? The man rose quickly, his eyes scanning the distance. Shadows flickered along the dunes, moving slowly, watching, waiting. They were not illusions. Someone was out there, someone was following. The girl tried to lift herself, but her body was too weak. She reached for him instead, her trembling hand gripping his wrist. Her eyes begged again, shining in the dim light. She was afraid not of him, but of what hunted them. The man tightened his jaw. The choice was clear. If he left her here, the shadows would take her, and her tears would end in silence. But if he stayed with her, if he carried her, he would become their target. He would face danger greater than he had ever known. He crouched again, looking directly into her eyes. His voice was low, rough, but steady. "You're not dying here," he said, though she could not understand the words, but she understood the tone. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, a faint spark lit within them. It was not joy, not yet, but something close, the beginning of trust. He lifted her once more, her body light as a feather. The horizon glowed faintly as the last of the sun sank. Night was coming, and with it, more danger. The wasteland was cruel in daylight, but in darkness it became a hunting ground. He knew they had to move, somewhere, anywhere, away from the cage, away from the shadows. As he walked, the girl rested against him, her breathing shallow but steadier now. From time to time, she made soft sounds, not words, but whispers of her alien tongue. He listened, not knowing their meaning, but somehow he felt she was telling him a story, A story of pain, of chains, of nights spent crying under the stars. A story of waiting for anyone to come, and now he was here. The desert night arrived fast. The stars burned bright above, sharp and endless. The man stopped on a ridge, looking down at the dark dunes stretching for miles. The shadows were closer now, moving in silence. He could not see faces, only shapes. But his instincts screamed. They were hunting her, and now they were hunting him too. He adjusted his grip, shifting her weight carefully. The girl stirred, opening her glowing eyes again. For a moment, she reached out weakly, pointing toward the horizon. Her hand trembled. But her meaning was clear. There was something out there, something she wanted him to find. Maybe shelter, maybe safety, maybe the answer to why she had been imprisoned. He nodded. He would follow her direction, even if it led deeper into danger. Behind them, the cage lay abandoned in the sand, but it was not forgotten. The hunters would find it soon. They would see the broken bars, the missing prisoner, and they would know she was free. The chase had already begun. The man tightened his grip on the alien girl and set his eyes on the horizon. He had made his choice. No matter what came, he would not abandon her. The desert was vast. The night was long, but together they would face it. The desert night was dark, but not silent. The man carried the alien girl across the dunes, his footsteps sinking into the cool sand. The stars above burned like cold fire, and the moon cast long shadows across the wasteland. But behind them, in the far distance, other shadows moved. He could feel them now, closer than before. They were not illusions of heat or tricks of light. They were real, and they were following. The girl stirred in his arms, her head lifting weakly. Her glowing eyes reflected the starlight, full of fear. She whispered something in her strange tongue. Her voice was faint but sharp, warning him. The man didn't understand her words, but he understood the tone. They were being hunted. He stopped. On a high ridge, lowering her gently onto the sand, he crouched, scanning the horizon. At first, he saw nothing but endless black dunes. But then, movement, faint figures walking in the distance, slow and steady. They carried long weapons that glimmered in the moonlight. Their heads were covered, their shapes tall and lean. Not human, not friends. The man's jaw tightened. These were the short ones who had locked her in the cage, and now they had found her scent again. He looked at the girl, weak and trembling but alive. If they caught her again, there would be no second chance. This time they would not leave her to die slowly. This time they would finish it. He lifted her again and began moving down the ridge. Faster now, each step driven by urgency. The sand shifted under his boots, sliding and falling with every stride. The girl clung to him with what little strength she had, her breath shallow, her heart beating fast against his chest. The night air grew colder, the wind stronger. It carried the sound of pursuit, crunching footsteps, soft voices in a language the man did not know. They were closing in every few minutes. He glanced back. The figures were nearer now, their movements calm and confident. They were hunters, skilled in the art of patience. They knew their prey had no escape. The man's mind raced. He could not fight them. Not yet. Not with the girl so weak and helpless. He needed to hide. To find shelter before dawn. The desert was wide, but somewhere out there had to be a place. He searched the horizon, eyes sharp, and then he saw it, dark shapes in the distance. Jagged and tall, cliffs, rocks rising out of the sand like the bones of the earth. If he could reach them, maybe he could find a cave, a place to rest, a place to defend. The girl lifted her hand weakly, pointing in the same direction. Her glowing eyes widened as if she recognized it. Perhaps she knew what lay there. Perhaps it was not only shelter, but something more. Either way, it was hope, and hope was enough. He pushed forward, his legs aching, his breath heavy. The hunters' voices grew louder, sharper. Once, a beam of pale light cut across the dunes, sweeping slowly. They were searching. They were close enough now to sense him, close enough to smell the fear. The girl pressed her head against his shoulder, whispering again. Her voice was broken, but urgent. She was warning him that time was running out. The man did not answer. But he tightened his grip on her. He would not give her up. Not now, not ever. The cliffs loomed larger as he ran. Sharp rocks cut into the sand, and the ground grew. Uneven at last, he reached the edge of the stone, his chest heaving with exhaustion. He set the girl down gently behind a boulder and crouched low, listening. The footsteps behind him were louder now. The hunters were near. He could hear the click of their weapons, the soft growl of their voices. They were moving carefully, confident that their prey was trapped. The man gripped his blade tightly. He was only one man, but if they came too close, he would fight. His heart pounded as he thought of it. Steel against unknown weapons. One human against many. It was madness. But he had made his choice. He would not run forever. The girl reached out, her thin fingers touching his arm. Her eyes glowed softly. In the dark, there was fear in them. Yes, but also something else. Trust. She believed in him, though she had no reason to. Though she barely knew him, she believed he would protect her. The man looked back at her, and in that moment, his fear turned into fire. He was not only fighting for himself anymore, he was fighting for her freedom, for her life, for the chance to prove that even in this wasteland, humanity still meant something. The footsteps grew closer. Shadows moved between the rocks. The hunters had arrived. The man rose slowly, his blade ready. The girl behind him whispered again, her voice trembling but strong. The desert night held its breath, and then the pursuit became a confrontation. The night was still, but the rocks around them carried whispers of danger. The man crouched low, his blade in his hand, his back against the cold stone. The alien girl lay behind him, weak but watching, her glowing eyes fixed on him as if drawing strength from his presence. The hunters moved among the cliffs, their shadows stretching long and thin across the sand. They were patient, careful, as if they knew their prey could not escape. The man's heart pounded, but his mind was sharp. He had lived through many dangers, but this was different. This was not about survival for himself. This was about her. She was more than just a prisoner, more than a stranger he had freed. He could feel it every time her eyes met his. There was something about her that the hunters feared, something they wanted to destroy. A sudden flash of pale light swept across the rocks. The hunters were searching, their strange weapons glowing. Faintly, the man pulled the girl closer into the shadows. Holding a finger to his lips, she understood, staying silent, though her body shook with exhaustion and fear. For a long moment, the hunters passed by, their shapes fading into the dunes. The man let out a slow breath, but then the girl moved her hand weakly, pointing toward the broken chain he had cut from her cage. Her lips moved, and soft sounds came from her throat. It was not his language, but the meaning seemed clear. They will never stop. He leaned closer, whispering, "Why? Why do they want you?" Of course, she could not understand his words, but she looked into his eyes and seemed to know what he asked. Her trembling fingers touched her chest, just above her heart. And for the first time, he noticed something strange. A faint glow beneath her skin, soft and blue, pulsing like a second heartbeat. It shimmered for only a moment before fading again. The man's eyes widened. This was no ordinary girl, no ordinary captive. There was something inside her, something powerful, and that was the reason they had locked her in chains, not because she was weak, but because she was dangerous. The girl's eyes filled with tears as she tried to explain in broken whispers. He could not understand her words, but he understood her pain. She had been taken because of what she carried within. The hunters had feared her, so they had tried to break her spirit. They wanted her gone, erased, forgotten in the sand. But she had survived, even in that cage, even through suffering, and now she was free. The man's chest grew heavy with realization. If they caught her again, they would not make the same mistake. They would not leave her to die slowly. They would end her life quickly and bury the secret forever. And if they thought he would let that happen, they were wrong. The hunters' voices echoed again. Closer this time, the man rose to his feet, his blade ready. He turned to the girl and whispered firmly, "I'll keep you safe." She could not understand the words, but her eyes softened. She believed him, and in that belief was strength. Suddenly, a rock shifted nearby. The man spun. His blade flashing in the moonlight, one of the hunters stepped into view, tall and thin. Its face hidden under a dark mask. Its weapon glowed faintly with cruel light. The man's heart raced. He was only human, carrying nothing but steel and courage, but he would not step back. The hunter hissed in its strange tongue. Raising the weapon, the girl gasped, her glowing eyes wide with terror. But then, something unexpected happened. Her body shivered, and the faint blue light beneath her skin glowed brighter. It pulsed, once, twice, like the rhythm of a drum, and for a moment the air around her seemed to bend. The hunter froze, its body jerking as if struck by an unseen force. Its weapon slipped slightly, its aim broken. The man did not hesitate. He lunged forward, driving his blade into the hunter's chest. The creature let out a sharp cry before falling to the ground. The glow from its weapon faded, leaving only silence. The girl collapsed back against the rock, her breathing ragged. Her glow faded again, hidden beneath her skin. But the man had seen it. He had seen the truth. She carried something inside her, something powerful enough to shake even her captors. And that was why they feared her. The man wiped his blade and crouched beside her. Again, she was trembling, not only from weakness, but from fear of herself. She did not want this power. It was a burden, not a gift, but to the man. It was something else entirely. It was proof that she was worth saving, no matter the cost. The night grew darker, the hunters' voices sharper. They had heard the cry of their fallen. They were coming. The man lifted her once more, his eyes burning with determination. He knew now that this was no simple act of kindness. This was a battle for something greater than either of them, for freedom, for survival, for hope. He glanced at the horizon, where the cliffs grew taller and darker. Somewhere ahead lay the answer. But first, they had to survive the night, and with every step he took, the man knew one thing for certain. The girl was not only a prisoner, she was a secret, a weapon, and a light in the darkness. And the hunters would never stop chasing her, but neither would he stop protecting her. The desert cliffs stood tall and sharp under the moonlight. The man pressed his back against the cold stone, holding the alien girl close. Her breath was shallow, her body trembling, but her glowing eyes stayed fixed on him. She trusted him, even when fear filled the night air. The sound of footsteps echoed through the rocks. The hunters were closing in. Their voices hissed in a strange language, carrying through the wind. They were not rushing. They were patient, calm, confident. They believed their prey had nowhere to run. The man's grip tightened on his blade. He had only steel against their glowing weapons. But steel in human hands had ended battles before, and tonight it would have to again. The girl shifted weakly, her thin hand touching his arm. Her skin glowed faintly, the strange light pulsing again beneath her flesh. She shook her head slowly, as if to warn him, "Don't fight them," but he only gave her a firm nod. He had no choice. If they caught her again, she would never see freedom. If he fell, at least he would fall fighting for her. The first hunter appeared, tall and thin. Stepping between the rocks, its weapon glowed with pale fire, aimed at the man's chest. Behind it, more shadows moved. Spreading out, surrounding him, the desert air grew heavy, every breath filled with tension. The man lowered the girl gently onto the sand, placing her behind a rock for cover, her glowing eyes followed him, wide with fear, but burning with trust. He turned to face the hunters, his blade shining in the moonlight. He was only one human, but his heart beat with fire. The first hunter raised its weapon. The man lunged, closing the distance before it could fire. Steel clashed against strange metal, sparks flying into the night. The hunter hissed, striking back with inhuman speed. The man ducked low, rolling across the sand, his blade slicing into the creature's leg. It stumbled, letting out a sharp cry. The man did not stop. He moved with desperation. Each strike driven by survival, another hunter stepped forward. Aiming its weapon, the girl gasped, her eyes glowing brighter. The air shimmered around her, pulsing with strange energy. Before the weapon could fire, a shockwave burst from her body, invisible but powerful. It slammed into the hunter, knocking it against the rocks. The creature let out a guttural scream before falling silent. The man glanced back at her in shock. She was trembling, frightened by her own power. But in her eyes, he saw something new. Strength. The hunters hissed louder. Now, their voices sharp and angry. They had underestimated their prisoner and the human who stood with her. Two more rushed forward, their weapons glowing brighter. The man met them head-on, his blade flashing. One weapon struck the ground near him, burning the sand into glass. But he kept moving, dodging, striking, his muscles burning with effort. He cut one across the arm, sending its weapon spinning into the dark. The other swung at him, and he barely blocked the strike, sparks bursting into the night. The girl cried out again, her body shaking as the blue glow inside her pulsed stronger. Her hands lifted weakly, and another wave of energy rippled outward. The rocks themselves seemed to tremble, sand lifting into the air. The nearest hunter was thrown back, crashing into the cliff wall with a sickening thud. The man's eyes widened. Her power was wild, uncontrolled, but it was saving them. Together, they were not prey. Together, they were a force. The last of the hunters circled carefully now, their movements slower, cautious. They had seen enough to know this fight would not be simple. The man stood tall, his blade dripping with dark blood under the moonlight. He looked back at the girl, her glowing eyes locked on him, and for the first time he saw not fear, but fire. She wanted to fight. One of the hunters let out a loud cry. A signal. The others moved in at once. The man charged forward, his body aching, his heart burning. He slashed and struck with everything he had. One fell, another staggered back, but one weapon found its mark, grazing his side with burning light. Pain tore through him, but he did not fall. He pushed forward, his blade sinking into the chest of the creature. Behind him, the girl screamed. The glow inside her erupted, brighter than ever before. The sand lifted into the air, spinning like a storm. A wave of force exploded outward, slamming into the remaining hunters. They were thrown back like broken dolls, their weapons scattering across the ground. Silence followed. The man staggered, his chest heaving, his side burning with pain. But he stood, blade still in hand. The girl lay on the sand, glowing faintly, her body weak but alive. The hunters were gone, broken and scattered across the desert floor. The fight was over. For now, the man stumbled back to her side. Crouching low, her glowing eyes met his, filled with exhaustion, but also with something new. Not just trust, not just hope, but belief. She touched his hand with trembling fingers, and though she could not speak his language, her eyes said everything. Together, they had won. Together, they were free. but deep inside. Both of them knew this was not the end. The hunters would return, and greater dangers were waiting in the wasteland. Still, under the cold desert stars, the man and the alien girl shared a silent promise. No matter what came, they would face it together. The desert was quiet again. The bodies of the hunters lay scattered across the sand, their weapons broken, their voices silent. The night wind carried the smell of dust and metal, and the stars above watched without mercy. The man stood weakly, his side burning from the wound, his blade heavy in his hand, but he was alive. And more importantly, she was alive. The alien girl lay against the cold rock, her body trembling with exhaustion. Her glow had faded, dim and soft now, but her eyes still shone faintly in the dark. When she looked at him, there was no more fear. Only trust, only belief. She had given all she had, her power nearly breaking her body, but together they had survived. The man sank to his knees beside her. He pressed his hand against his wound, blood seeping through his fingers, but he ignored the pain. He reached out and brushed a strand of dusty hair from her face. Her skin was cold, her breath shallow, yet she was still with him, still fighting for a long time. They sat in silence. The desert night stretched on, endless and cruel, but in that silence, something new was born between them. A bond not of words, but of survival, of sacrifice, of hope. At last, the first light of dawn touched the horizon. The sky turned from black to deep blue, then to pale gold. The sun rose slowly, spilling light across the dunes. The desert looked different in the morning, less like a grave, more like a new beginning. The girl stirred, lifting her head weakly. Her glowing eyes caught the morning light, shining brighter for a moment. She reached for his hand, her fingers trembling. When he took it, she squeezed lightly, her grip weak but filled with meaning. He understood. She was thanking him, not only for saving her, but for not leaving her behind. The man gave a small nod. He could not speak her language, but words were not needed. His choice was clear. He would not abandon her now, not ever. He rose slowly, lifting her again into his arms. Her head rested against his chest, her eyes half closed. She was exhausted, broken but alive, and with every step he took into the rising sun, the weight on his shoulders felt less heavy, not because she was light, but because he had chosen this path freely. Behind them, the battlefield was silent. The hunters who had chased them through the night would not rise again, but others would come. The man knew it. She knew it too. Her enemies would not stop until she was gone. And now, because of his choice, they would hunt him as well. But he did not fear it. For the first time in many years, he was not walking alone. As the sun climbed higher, the cliffs gave way to open desert again. The heat rose quickly, shimmering across the dunes. The man searched the horizon. Somewhere out there had to be shelter, water, a place where they could rest and gather strength, somewhere beyond the wasteland. Maybe, lay answers. Why had she been imprisoned? What power slept inside her body? And why did the hunters fear her so much? The girl stirred again, lifting her hand weakly to point ahead. Her eyes glowed faintly as she looked toward the far distance. The man followed her gaze. At first, he saw only sand, but then faint shapes, broken towers rising out of the earth, ruins, ancient and dark. Maybe she knew this place. Maybe that was where her journey had begun, or where it needed to end. The man tightened his grip. He would take her there, whatever secrets waited, whatever dangers returned, they would face them together. The girl rested her head against him again. Her eyes closed, but her lips moved softly. A single sound escaped, a word in her strange tongue. He could not understand it, but the way she spoke it made his chest grow warm. Perhaps it was her name, perhaps it was a promise. The man smiled faintly, rare and tired. The desert sun burned. Hot, the sand endless, but for the first time in a long time. He felt not despair, but purpose. He was not just a wanderer anymore. He was a protector, a guardian, and she was not just a prisoner. She was a survivor, a light in the dark. As they walked into the dawn, the cage they had left behind became only a memory, a symbol of chains broken, of tears turned into strength. The wasteland was still cruel. The journey still dangerous, but together they had a chance to fight, to endure, to live. The new day rose brighter, and with it, a new story began.